Morning, everybody. This is your captain speaking. Well, it's probably already afternoon in many parts of US and Canada. One thing I realized a couple of days ago, that how far I am now from my family in Russia, whereas before, when I lived in Cambridge, Ontario, the time difference was 8 hours. Now it's, I believe it's should be 10 hours. So basically, if I have to catch, if I want to catch them when I call them, it has to be like 9 o'clock in the morning my time. And in the morning I always forget, and then by the time I want to call them, it's too late. But anyway, I was thinking what I can talk about today, and I had a customer who had a machine shipping from a port in Canada going to another part of Canada, right? A small machine, and the shipper says, would prefer this to be shipped as LTL. And it was like 18 feet long, 7 feet wide, about 10 feet 1 inch tall. So basically it would fit on a step deck, but he insisted on LTL rate, which is of course lower than a regular truckload rate. And I found him a hotshot guy, some hotshot guy, you know, like one of those pickup trucks with a trailer, calls me, gives me a rate. So I pass it on with my, of course, with my fee to the customer, and no feedback. And then a couple of days later, he says, the customer says, oh, now we have two machines. Two of the same machine, shipping from the same place. So now I cannot use that hotshot guy because his deck, you know, like those trailers, he said it was like 30 feet in the well, but I'm pretty sure that he said he could take 14,000 pounds or something, you know, like a pickup truck with dual wheels in the back. But he cannot definitely take two backhoe small loaders, each of which was 6 metric tons, or roughly 13,200 pounds. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that, oh yeah, and so I found a couple of carriers, and I passed on the information, gave my quote to the customer, and no response. And then 2 days later, I emailed them. I said, how do you feel about my quote? And the customer says, sorry, we found a cheaper carrier. And that's basically the story of the broker's life, you know, in freight forwarding business. Because what happens is that, you know, a friend of mine, my boss, taught me this. He says, when you receive an email asking people for a quote, asking me for a quote on a particular shipment, he says, check if it shows your address. Does it say like me, you know, like somebody, and it's Google will say me, right, sending to me directly, and I can check the email address. If my email address shows, that means that that guy emailed me directly. But if it says, let's say some guy, let's say, I don't know, William Brown, and when I check who he emailed to, it'll say William Brown, like he's emailing himself. So basically what that means is that he has a mailing list, just like what I created on MailChimp. I created a list, like a database of carriers and shippers, and whenever I have a load or a trucker is asking me for a load, right, I can choose who I email. Like I can choose shippers or carriers, and I create a text, click one button, send, and when they receive my email, they will not see other people's emails. Like it look professional, but it's not going to show their email address, right? And unfortunately, that's what's going on in this industry. Is basically everybody is trying to save a buck, you know. I know many truckers, you know, blame freight brokers for this. Oh, freight brokers, you know, are thieves. They're stealing our money. And I was thinking like that when I became an independent trucker. And then I realized, yeah, I did a few cheap loads, and I remember my first load. I still remember it was a wheel loader. I think it was 800 something, either Cat or John Deere, and they gave me a rate. And what I forgot, out of inexperience as an independent, is that this was going in through like upstate New York, somewhere like towards Albany, let's say, from Ontario, and there's nowhere to go. Well, I could have gotten some permits, right, but that would be even worse. But I had to go on toll roads, right, and tolls and permits probably killed 50% of the rate they gave me. So it was by the time I finished, maybe I made like $1,000 or something, minus after fuel especially was deducted. Sorry for the noise. The guy is outside my window blowing some cleaning some snow with a blower. I wish they put some nice exhaust on that, so it sounds a bit throatier, like some Flowmaster or something. And so yeah, at first I blamed me as well as a trucker, I blamed brokers for this. And then I have this friend who's now my boss pretty much, right? And he was telling, and he's a broker, right? Well, more like a freight agent working for a large logistics company. And of course he was defending his position. And he says, look at people that, he says, how many shippers did you book with directly? And this was like a couple of years after I went independent. And by that time I did have a couple of direct shippers, which most truckers would think is the solution to all the problems in trucking, right? But turns out my friend was right. If you work with a direct shipper who is not willing to use brokers, like the irony is that you would think that, hey, I have a direct shipper, I hit the bank, right? I hit the gold mine. But the truth of the matter is that most of the time these shippers are cheap, right? If they don't want to use brokers, they are cheap. And when they're not cheap, they don't care about a few $100 that the broker will add to the rate. But we have to get paid, right? We have our own expenses. We do it for fun, but we also do it for profit, right? As brokers, I need to make some money. You have any idea how much insurance costs on a Hellcat? I rest my case. I'm just kidding. Actually, Hellcat insurance, I don't know why these guys I was watching some videos in the States, by the way, before I got the Hellcat, and because I was afraid that I'll have a very high rate, like $1,000 or $700 Canadian. Whereas with my Charger, it was $220 a month in Ontario, and then when I moved here, it became like $208 on the same Dodge Charger. And turns out Hellcat, the same insurance. I don't know, at least for me, I'm 60 years old, have decent driving record, didn't have any accidents in the past, I think, 5 years with a car, and so yeah, insurance is the same. But that was a line from replacement players, where football players went on strike, and one of them was talking to a reporter, and the reporter says, what, you guys are not happy with you getting like $10 million a year? And one of the players says, you have any idea how much insurance costs on a Ferrari? So he was complaining that he was not paid enough money. But anyway, so that's my point. So when you see cheap rates, it's not the broker, okay? It's the shipper. Because yeah, some truckers, they think that, oh man, these guys, I know they're very bad people, like talking about freight brokers or freight forwarders, that we find a truck for $1,000, and then we tell the shipper we found a guy, so we give a shipper the rate of $20,000, right? And so the broker makes $19,000, you know, and they're scumbags and they're bloodsuckers and stuff like that. So what happens in reality, right? This is the reality. Reality is a guy, a shipper, has a bunch of brokers on his mailing list, right? And whenever he has a machine, like in my case, right, I try to specialize in machines and equipment. And so far, the load I did, it was a bit related. It was landau, kind of like, not a landau, but it's the same idea, you know, like a tilt and load, kind of like a step deck trailer, right? Which is pretty cool. But so it is machinery. So that's what I'm trying to focus on, because this way it's easier to find customers and carriers. You cannot be a broker for everything, right? Like some new brokers, you know, they think, oh man, I'll start like with everything. Oh, you have a reefer? Oh, no problem. Like, I have no idea about reefers. Okay, I know flatbed, step decks. Maybe I can do flatbed loads, but for me, I decided that, you know, let's say I'm shipping a crane. A guy asked me to ship a crane, and of course a big crane has to be broken down into many loads, and some of them will be for flatbeds and step decks. So then I'm okay working with them, but the main load will go, or a couple of main loads will go on a RGM or double drop, right? And that's what I know as a former trucker. But anyway, so yeah, the typical scenario is the customer tries to ship a machine. Okay, he's not so cheap that he's willing to bypass brokers, so he contacts brokers on his huge mailing list, right? And there's no name, nothing. Morning, please, you know, requesting a rate and truck availability for the following load. And quite often they won't even give you any specs, so wait, it'll just say something like 336. You know, they don't even tell you the make, you know, so you're supposed to figure out that 336 is a cat 336. No dimensions, no weight, so I have to dig on the internet, try to find the specs, try to guess that they're right, and so it takes some time, right? But anyway, the most important thing is that they email everybody on their list, not just me, right? And so I cannot ask them for $20,000 on a $1,000 load, let's say, to the carrier, right? Because they're not stupid, right? They will have quotes from other brokers, and if my quote is way higher than somebody else's, and this happens a couple of times, they'll just stop using me. They'll just off the list, you know. And so what truckers think that brokers are just making a killing. It's maybe it's right sometimes, like in a 1 in 1,000 type of a deal, you know. But most often, who's to blame for cheap loads? It's shippers, right? And so yeah, so that's how it works. So the guy emails everybody on his list, the customer, and then we all try to find the cheapest truck, okay? And so I'm trying to give him the cheapest quote. So I'm trying to find the cheapest truck at a couple of bucks, and basically the goal is to pass his criteria, because I tried asking them a couple of times, hey guys, you know, like, could you give me a tip, an idea on your budget? They never tell you that. They never tell you that because they want the cheapest possible truck, okay? So the machine might cost $500,000, right? So they just paid $500,000 in US currency to the dealer, let's say in the States, but of course it's a lot of money. So now they're trying to save on carriers, on the freight, you know. And so they asked me for a quote. I started looking for carriers, like my logistics company, where I work as a agent and another agent, right? We have a huge database of carriers that are already in the system. So that's the first place to look. If I cannot find anybody there, I go to load boards, right? And then you start collecting quotes, and then you see how many trucks are in that lane, right? I can do a search on a load board to see like how many carriers are posting their trucks. Let's say I'm trying to find somebody to move a load from Toronto to Baltimore, right? So I go to the load board, I see like, if I see like 200 trucks, like basically begging for a load, I know that I can get a pretty good rate to the shipper because it's a lot of competition, right? Lots of trucks. But if I see like one truck posted, let's say something desperate, like there's a load from Toronto to Baltimore again to the port, and it has to be there on January 1st, which, okay, the port is closed, but let's just say something is like extremely urgent, right? Like expedited heavy haul freight. And I see like one guy on the load board and is willing to travel on New Year's Day. And let's say this is not an oversized load, doesn't need permits, otherwise he won't be able to travel. So then I see one guy, then I know that the rate has to be high, right? For this guy to move, he's not going to do it for cheap. And so, and that's how it works. And so that's the problem. The problem that the rates, they don't keep up with fuel prices, with permits, and quite often shippers have very vague idea about permits, right? If you try to ask them, what do you figure permits will cost? They delegate it to me, to the broker, right? But I know I have a website where I can go and I can pretty accurately estimate the cost of permits. Like I put in origin, destination, dimensions, weight, type of a trailer, or of course like RGN, but depending on the axles, right, it'll affect the weight, the gross weight. And then the computer tells me, okay, in this state you will need police escort, which always jerks up the price, right? In this state you will need a high pole car, in this state you will need, you will need 2 pilots because of the length, right? But quite often shippers don't care about this, right? So let's say the permits, I figure out the permits will cost $5,000, and the shipper says, well, we're looking for somewhere close to 6, So that's the reality of trucking, unfortunately. And that's what I wanted to mention, so that truckers stop blaming brokers. So because most of the time it's the shippers that don't have enough money to spend, or they're not willing to spend as much on a truck, okay? Because probably they spend too much on the equipment itself. Of course, there's, especially when it's coming from US to Canada, Canada to US, there's a lot of expenses shipping something across the international border. Even though many American dealers think that Canada is just another state, unfortunately it's not. So there's different rules and regulations they have to follow, right? And so that's how it works. And also wanted to mention that I'm looking here at my date in the top right of the screen. I'm recording this on my iMac, by the way. This is the first time I'm doing like a direct video using my what am I using? Photo booth on my iMac. And today's 28, and I was thinking of maybe doing a question and answer, a live session maybe on the 30th. So what do you guys think? You tell me what I'm looking at the calendar here. So 30th will be Friday. So maybe I'll do something. I know I have some viewers in Australia, England, which of course they are in different time zone, but I was thinking somewhere around like 3 o'clock my time, mountain time, so it'll be 5 in the east, and so this will be what, 5 plus 8, what is it, like 1 o'clock in the morning in Russia, for example. And maybe make it 2 o'clock. But anyway, I'll figure out, or you guys maybe post a comment and tell me what do you think the time should be. But I definitely want to do it Friday, December 30th, and we'll just choose the time, and I'll post an announcement on the community page there, where you see me sometimes posting pictures or some announcements, stuff like that. So check out over there. And I just wanted to say that this time I don't want to deal with non-subscribers. So subscribers only, like anybody can watch, but only if you're a subscriber, you'll be able to post comments and ask questions. Okay, I hope this video was helpful in some way to truckers and shippers and equipment shippers. So again, I'm Sergei Dratchev. I'm an heavy equipment specialist in Alberta. So you want to ship some equipment to US or US to Canada, I'm your guy. Okay, ciao.